Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Arrogant. So in this video I'd like to go over the armor enchantments and which one would be best on a DPS character to basically help you do more damage rather than survivability. So for instance, many of us have been relying on the Barkshield armor enchantment to give us that extra boost in survivability, and I guess a dead DPS ain't doing any damage, so you may as well have a little bit of survivability to make sure you actually can survive and do the damage. However, the Barkshield has been nerfed as of the new combat change, and now it only blocks like lower amounts of damage, that being at 51,000 at its maximum block. It used to be up to like 250,000. And with the recent combat change, we've also had a change in the amount of hit points DPS have. So we actually have a lot more now. It's about 150,000 increase, if not more than that. Along with then, as a result, the enemies dealing more damage, and therefore the Barkshield is less impactful. So we might want to go and look at other armor enchantments that would actually buff up the amount of damage we can deal. For example, this Fireburst enchantment where you can hurl fireballs at people and deal a bit more damage. Or let's say the Loamweave, where when you receive damage you have a chance of dealing a pretty hefty amount of magnitude damage back to your attacker. And then there's even the Thunderhead one, where similar to the Loamweave, whenever you get hit, you also have a chance at hurling damage back at them, but Thunderhead has the ability of dealing damage to other foes also within that area of 20 feet. And then we have finally the Briartwine of reflecting 6% of the damage that enemies deal to you back to them. And there are a few other ones, but those four are the main ones that I can see that would contribute to dealing more damage against enemies, at least reliably. You do have like the Soul Forged enchantment, where when you are resurrected for 3 seconds you will deal 16% more damage. However, you really don't want to die, and when you do die and get resurrected, you will lose 10% extra damage unless you have the Revive Sickness one, which will reduce 10 to 5% instead. So that's not ideal to rely on dying to give you more damage. Then like Shadowclad's not going to give you more damage whatsoever, nor is the Negation. Loamweave is on my list. Frostburn isn't really going to give anything in the way of extra damage. Fireburst is on my list. Elven Battle, again, nothing's going to give you more damage. Eclipse, same. We have Briartwine on the list. Blood Theft is going to give you more heal. And finally Barkshield. And that's all the armor enchantments within the game in this pack right here, along with even the weapon enchantments. Pretty decent pack if you ask me. So these 4 DPS enchantments for your armor, which one would you use to maximize that damage in single target and in AoE? Well, I done a bit of testing. I went into the queue, the skirmish, the Master of the Hunt, and it's fairly doable solo, especially on my build, and we went and ran it each time with each of these armor enchantments, each time switching them out. So the results that we obtained was first with this Briartwine armor enchantment. It basically has the ability to reflect 6% of the damage you take back to your attacker. So the more damage you take from your enemies, the more damage you'll deal back to them. It does pretty abysmal damage. And you can put this into consideration. I am solo, meaning there's no tank with me, meaning I'm going to draw all of the aggro and I'm going to take all the hits. Sure, if I dodge and stuff, then the Briartwine won't do anything, because if you take no damage, you'll deal no damage back. Even all these put into consideration, it only got 114 hits over that duration of 4 minutes and 42 seconds of combat time. And that was about 1% of my overall damage. That's next to nothing. And I wouldn't bother getting an armor enchantment for just 1% more. So we move on to the next armor enchantment, and we have the Thunderhead. This, disappointingly, did even less damage than the Briartwine. You can see it done 0% there compared to all of the other damage values that I have. So it was a little bit under 1%, I guess, just rounded down to 0. Thunderhead enchantment basically has the ability on a chance when you're hit of a 10% to deal magnitude of 160 as lightning damage to that foe, as well as all other foes within 20 feet. Now, The unfortunate thing is this 10% chance, because when we look at the amount of times it actually hit, it was only 22 times. And again, this is Master of the Hunt and solo, so I'm taking all the hits, except maybe a few that Kasuna might take instead of me. And the duration here, we managed to complete the skirmish in an even little bit quicker time there at 4 minutes and nearly 20 seconds. So we go to the Loamweave enchantment, and this did about the same as the Thunderhead. The Loamweave has a drawback that again, it's the same 10% chance to occur, but its magnitude is a good bit higher at 240, but it doesn't have the extra ability that the Thunderhead has of dealing damage to foes around you. So it's a single target armor enchantment that can deal damage, but at a 10% chance, it's just not reliable, and it really doesn't trigger all too often. You can see 12 times over 5 minutes. This time it took me a good bit longer to complete the skirmish, and this is averaging at, again, only just over 0% of my overall damage. So finally we go to the Fireburst enchantment, and it's actually looking good here. And the reason being is that this Fireburst enchantment, basically whenever you receive damage, no chance involved here, you will hurl a fireball at your attacker and up to 5 other foes within 15 feet of 120 magnitude. That's not a significant amount, but every little helps, and without it being a chance, it means you can reliably trigger this every time you run into a fight. However, the cooldown on this is 15 seconds. But additionally, you will actually gain some survivability from this. Whenever you're critically struck, now since enemies have a 50% chance to critically strike you and there's no way we can reduce this, it's pretty high that you will be able to generate a flame shield. And this will increase your resistance by 5.3%. This will only last 5 seconds, however, but when you are struck with this flame shield, you will release a secondary fireball. Now it will deal damage of up to 3.6 times your weapon damage. So this is, as we can see here, my weapon damage is 6,381. We multiply that by 3.6 and we get about 22,971 of this damage that we can deal through that secondary fireball. Albeit that's not a whole lot, since we're going to go and multiply that then by only 60%, because enemies do have damage resistance, and we deal about 14,000 on that hit for the secondary fireball. In my opinion, and from my testing, it is the best armor enchantment that's going to deal the most damage in both single target and in AoE. You would think the Loamweave is better in single target, but if you're not the tank, then it's not going to be, because you're not going to be taking hits all too often. Of course, that could be pretty good when you're against a boss which has damage over time effects, for example in Voss. So I'd need to test this out specifically, but I did go and do a single target kind of dummy test, and when we tested the Loamweave, we can see there over a period of 1 minute and 20 seconds, it did about 1.6 thousand encounter DPS, and we can compare that with the Fireburst of dealing there 3.2 thousand encounter DPS, and that was under 50 seconds, and the reason it's shorter is because it actually killed the target in that time. So Fireburst is still excelling better than you would have your Loamweave, because of this annoying 10% chance on its armor enchantment. And the same goes with the Thunderhead. It is a little bit better in AoE, you would think, if the mobs are grouped up, but again, really not reliable if you're not the tank. So overall, in conclusion, it is the Fireburst enchantment that would be the best armor enchantment to be running as a DPS character, just to gain a little boost. And as we can see, the Fireburst enchantment was 3% of my overall damage. Again, it's not a lot, and it's really not something I would worry about. If you're currently rocking a Barkshield, as probably many people are, as in my opinion it's still the best armor enchantment for survivability for a player who doesn't get hit often, like a DPS. And in trials like Tower of the Mad Mage or Zario, your goal is not to get hit often, and thus a Barkshield is pretty good to tank those big hits that might happen every now and again, albeit it's only going to block about 50,000. and you're going to get hit for a good bit more than that. So that wraps up this video. If you want to go and pick up a Fireburst enchantment to maximize your outgoing damage in like a dungeon, you'll get about on average a 3% increase to your overall damage. It is going to be quite expensive, armor enchantments generally are, along with the weapon ones, but if you have the fortunate ability to already have one, you may as well slot one in. That being, if you don't need the extra survivability from something like a negation or a Barkshield. Of course, the Fireburst does have the added effect of giving you 5.3% damage resistance, and that critically struck ability also procs whenever you get healed by a critical heal, much like the wisps of the Shadow Demon boots, as you may be familiar with. So that's everything for this video. Hopefully it's somewhat insightful and helpful to you guys. If it was, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.